this afternoon we're looking at the secrets of the healthy bowel, the healthy gut. All right, so when we're talking about the gut, we're talking about the human microbe. And this has become a very important topic over the last 5 years in particular. It's been there for a while, but certainly the conversation over the last 5 years has been very engaging on the concept of the human microbiome, which is what it's called, the human microbiome. When we're looking at the gut now, we're realizing we're not just dealing with a physical entity, i.e., cells and muscles and all that sort of thing. We're dealing with a whole ecosystem that is called the human microbiome. It's an ecosystem. And that whole ecosystem plays an important role in the functioning of the human body. And this human microbiome, which consists of not just, as I said, not just cells and red blood cells and white blood cells and Peyer's patches and mucus and so on, it also consists of resident viruses, bacteria, fungi that reside within that whole system. And that ecosystem of everything is called the human microbiome. Is the largest organ of the body. It weighs anywhere between 2 and 3 kilograms in an adult. It's an extremely large and important system. And when you look at the ecosystem, that ecosystem is present in almost every part of your body. It's present in your nose with the mucus production and the cells and antimicrobials there. It's present in the mouth. It's present in the lungs, in the stomach, in the colon, in the sexual organs, and in the skin, on the skin. These are all present. These organisms, and it's not just an organism, it's an interplay between the organisms and the human cells. And that interplay is what is called the human microbiome. So the human microbiome is much bigger than just one area, one organ. It's an entire system that's involved. But of course, what we're looking at specifically is the gut microbiome. What is this synergy that exists between different gut flora and the human cells and the mucus, and what can we do and how important is it? Well, before we discuss the gut, so I hope that makes sense. So there's a human microbiome, and just to remind you, that involves the entire body: the nose, the mouth, the lungs, the stomach, colon, organs, skin. That's called the human microbiome, but we're looking specifically at the gut now, the gut, the gastrointestinal tract, and the bowel, and saying what's the gut microbiome and what is the implication of the gut microbiome. So the gastrointestinal tract is a tube within a tube. It's a body, and has a tube within that body. That's called the digestive system, and it's made up of different organs, such as the mouth, the pharynx, which is the throat, the esophagus, which is the gullet, or what people call the gullet, what goes from the throat to the stomach. Then you have the stomach, the small intestine, large intestine, and rectum. And that's the whole gastrointestinal tract. Now, that gastrointestinal tract is supported by a number of functions. A number of functions it does. It has a number of organs linked to it. For example, it has the liver, has the gallbladder, you see, attached to it. It has part of the immune system attached to it. So, the pancreas and so on. So it's not just simply a tube. It's a tube that's functional, and it's interacting with a number of other cellular structures and other organ systems that form part of the gastrointestinal tract. As I said, the liver, gallbladder, the even look at the digestive system, the teeth, and so on. And they each have a function. Each of those parts, the salivary gland, the pharynx, the esophagus, stomach, pancreas, small intestines, large intestines, the gallbladder, the liver, the oral cavity. They each have a very specific function in maintaining the gut microbiome, that whole that entity in a balance, in an ecosystem that remains balanced. So when you look at the various functions of the digestive tract, you have like the esophagus, which would be neurotransmission, muscle contraction and relaxation that allows the food to go from the mouth to the digestive center, which is by the stomach to start. Then in the stomach you have gastric acid secretion, muscle contraction that allows it to go to the So the small intestine and large intestine. Then you have the liver providing lipid metabolism of fats, for example. Carbohydrate metabolism, protein metabolism is also involved. Pancreas is doing insulin, glucagon, and also digestion of various food substances. And it's also important in the proliferation of apoptosis. Apoptosis is cell death, the cleansing, scavenging. The body has to scavenge. Remember we talked about that earlier on. We talked about the need to do time-restricted eating, and we're saying that's allow the body to clear. That's called scavenging. The body has to scavenge. It has to get rid of all the rubbish and the dead tissue and the dead cells. And the pancreas is part of that system. And the colon, of course, is in electrolyte balance, and it has muscle contraction to get the toxins, the solid toxins and residue out of the body. So, when it comes into the mouth, the residue comes out on the other side. So the truth is that when you compare us, we are more bacteria than we are human. There's much, if you were to add up the amount of bacteria in and on us, it will be much more, there are more cells that are bacteria than there are human cells. And these microbiome, these bacteria and these microbes, they work with their own complements of genes, and they have their own environment. Some of them produce enzymes that are important for the body and so on. They live in an established area and an established environmental factor that forms part of the ecosystem. And when we go and start messing up with our ecosystem, we pay a very heavy price for disturbing the microbiome. This synthesis, this symbiosis that exists between cells and the organisms that are there to support us. So you look at the number of gut, like a healthy gut would have 100 trillion bacteria, 100 trillion. And that's about 10 times the number of cells that we have. So the human is about 23,000 genes. We have about 3 million genes in our 100 trillion bacteria in the gut. So it's 150 times larger genes than the human genome. So they're just much more microbial units in our body and in our gut than there are human cells that we have. I don't think we appreciated that how important. And anything that has that large presence, that it has so much colony factors or colony units, with so much genomes present, means it has a powerful impact on the person's health. There's no doubt about it. It will have a big impact on your health because it is contributing a strong genomic factor. It operates in communal relationship with the humans. So it's in a symbiotic, it's a friendly relationship. But these things are significant factors in human health. So we now consider microbiome, this whole colony of organisms as an organ. Just like we call the liver, the spleen, the heart, the lung, the microbiome is now classed as an organ. And we ought to take care of our microbiome just as much as you should take care of your heart, just as much as you take care of your kidneys and your lungs and your brain. You ought to take care of your microbiome. It is classed as an organ of your body. To organize, it's an important part of the immune system. And there are 4 large groups of bacteria in the microbiome that are involved. The Acinetobacter bacteria, the Bacteroides, Firmicutes, and the Proteobacteria. So those are just fancy names of different types of bacteria. Now you say, well, why are you giving me all of that and I'm not doing? Why are you doing the PhD lecture? Well, I'm doing the PhD lecture because when you go to the supermarket or the pharmacy and you need to buy things, you need to know what you're buying. You look on the bottle. You need to know exactly what you're looking for. So these are the 4 groups of phyla or groups of bacteria that are there that are involved in the normal microbiome. Bacteroides and Firmicutes make up about 90% of the bacteria that we have in our gut. Even though each of us has a distinct balance, the fecal bacteria remain pretty stable over a long period of time, except you are unwell. I've seen that happen as well, and your gut bacteria changes. People with irritable bowel syndrome, people with Crohn's disease, people who have diarrhea, and all that sort of thing. Their gut bacteria changes. But most people will find a stable gut bacteria that they will work with over a number of years. So here is just a sort of approximate colony forming units of bacteria that are present in different parts of the gastrointestinal tract. So in the stomach here between 10 to 1 to 10 to the 3, which is 1,000. The jejunum 10 to 4 to 10 to 7. The colon is 10 to 11 to 10 to 12, and the duodenum 10 to 1 to 10 to 3. So if you look at it, the jejunum and the colon have the largest amount of bacteria in the gut biome, in the gut microbiota that is present. And that tells you that much of the activity of the gut occurs in the colon. Much of the activity of the gut bacteria occurs in the colon. And that's why, for example, when people have colectomies, or when they have colectomies, means they take their colon out, their health deteriorates. Now, sometimes you have to take it out because you get cancer. Where do you get most of your cancers? You get most of your cancers in the colon and lower bowel. There's very little small bowel cancer. There's very little stomach cancer. Those exist, but most of the cancers are in that lower bowel. And that would suggest to me anyway that we're not taking good care of our colons, not taking good care of our microbiome in our colon. So what do these gut microbiota do, and how are they present? How did they get there? Well, the evidence is they get there from your birth. So when you're going through the birth canal, when a baby is going through the female birth canal, that passage through the birth canal seeds the gut bacteria. It's the beginning of the gut bacteria. So that people who have cesarean sections, that's one of the criticisms of a cesarean section, is that they don't get a chance to be cultured by the bacteria from the birth canal. Anyway, so it colonizes from the birth canal, and then of course with oral breastfeeding and so on, the breast milk is able to stimulate and encourage the production of gut bacteria. And that's really important to have that established, because if you don't have good gut bacteria as a child, it's very hard to get it as you're growing up. The complete colonization of the gut occurs by the time the child is 3 years old. So the impact is significant, and you want to get the right growth of bacteria within that time frame. So what are the functions of this gut microbiota? And it's a lot bigger than we thought before. We didn't think bacteria was so important. It turns out that whole relationship between the gut and the bacteria is very crucial. First of all, it prevents the colonization by pathogens. So these things are your defense mechanism. These are the policemen of the gut, so that they prevent the overgrowth, because there will always be some bacteria that are not supposed to be there, at least not supposed to be there in numbers, that will try to take advantage of any situation. And so these gut bacteria are there to fight off and defend the gut against other invading organisms. So they educate the immune system. They inform the immune system of what's a dangerous bacteria and what is not. They even have a metabolic role in caloric salvage. So they're able to retrieve calories for the person. They're important in nutrition, producing the fatty acids, in producing vitamin K and folic acid. That's what the gut bacteria are there for. They produce those things. And of course, it participates in certain types of drug metabolisms and deconjugates bile acid. So when the bile goes into the stomach, from the stomach into the small intestines and going down the tract, the gut bacteria is important to decontaminate bile acids, because bile acids can be toxic, gives you diarrhea. So it's pretty important, the microbiome. It's important in preventing disease. There's a delicate balance between the gut microbiome and the humankind. And that delicate balance is very easy to mess up. Things that can influence gut bacteria will be type of diet, high fat, high sugar diet. That sounds pretty much like what a lot of people eat. High fat and high sugar diet. It can cause increase in your LPS, which is your liposomal cell, this outer coating of the bacteria, which can become activated by the immune system and cause infection and disease. It can cause inflammation. It can cause leaky gut. It can affect your ability to metabolize fat. It's interesting, isn't it? It actually affects your ability to metabolize fat, and it also protects your gut. So there's a lot of things that could go wrong if you disturb the delicate balance between the gut bacteria and the gut cellular system. It can go terribly wrong, terribly wrong. So many diseases have now been shown to be linked to a dysregulated gut microbiome. So many diseases have now come up, which we're now realizing is coming from the gut. And look at the list: diabetes, obesity, metabolic syndrome is just pre-diabetic, same thing, stress and anxiety, people who suffer with anxiety, people who suffer with chronic stress and depression as well, heart disease, ischemic heart disease, allergic disorders, irritable bowel syndrome, cancer, aging, autism, celiac disease, coronary artery disease. You know, all of these things have been linked to a dysfunctional gut. I mean, we would never have thought that your heart is linked to your gut, or diabetes is linked to your gut, or obesity is linked to your gut. So it turns out, or depression, it turns out that many of these things are coming from dysfunctional gut microbiome. And if you can fix those things, you can deal with a lot of the conditions that we are seeing. So just to remind us very quickly of the arrangement for the gut. The gut has got a single cell layer of cells. Now, that's the thing that most people don't realize. Your gut is really delicate. Your gut is very delicate. And I know some people say, well, I kind of knew that already, Dr. Tony. And that's true. But I need to show you how delicate it really is. It's just made up of one single cell layer of cells. That's the epithelial cells. Literally one single cell. And then there are different, like they have pits or villi, pits and villi. These are pits here. The little pit in it is where it produces different enzymes, for example, and vitamins. It's also where the bacteria live. The bacteria live right down in the base of those little pits. But they're not bad. They're working with the cell to improve the integrity of the cell and to protect it. Many of those bacteria are involved in producing mucus, the mucus layer that covers the intestinal layer is coming from bacteria. They are very helpful. They're trying to help us. But if you break down the integrity of the relationship between the bacteria and the intestinal cell, you get what is called leaky gut syndrome, which is where the gut leaks. And so leaky gut syndrome is where you lose the mucosa layer, and the normal junctions, which are called tight junctions, so they're tightly packed together, they loosen out like that. And because it's just a single layer, there's nothing to protect you behind here. If you open that door, anything in the gut, any toxins in the gut, just go straight into the blood. There's nothing to protect you. So if you destroy the mucus layer, and then you cause the cells, because of the tight relationship between the bacteria and the cells, you have the cells starting to open out and loosen out like that, which is what is called leaky gut, then you get disease. And so there are a number of diseases that have now been shown to be linked to the leaky gut. Depression, anxiety, even ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorders, coming from the gut. The skin, so when you think like people have like acne and psoriasis, eczema. I'm not talking about the little spot here now then, we're not talking about that. We're talking about that someone's got it chronic all the time. A real problem. It's coming from the gut. Psoriasis, coming from the gut. We even think Alzheimer's is coming from the gut, ladies and gentlemen. Alzheimer's, there's some evidence that's strongly supporting the idea that tau protein, which is what causes the fibrillar tangles in the brain, actually comes from the gut and then goes in the blood to the brain. And that's what's causing the tangular fibrils, the plaques in the brain that forms Alzheimer's. It's scary, this thing that's happening here. Thyroid disease, Hashimoto's, inflammatory thyroiditis, and so on. Graves' disease coming from the gut. Colon, constipation, diarrhea, irritable bowel syndrome. In the adrenal glands, fatigue. In the joints, rheumatoid, fibromyalgia, headaches. Some types of headaches could all be coming from the gut. In the nose, sinusitis and frequent colds and food sensitivities and so on, food allergies, can all be coming from leaky gut. So ladies and gentlemen, what we're talking about looks minor. You think, well, why does he really have to talk about the gut? I mean, like, that can't be important. Why doesn't he talk about the heart? In terms of the most important system that interrelates and interacts with multiple organs in your body, the gut is the answer. I'm perfectly talking about the right thing this afternoon for you. You know, because if you don't get the gut right, no point trying to fix the heart. In some regards. Not only is that, here is an important one. This morning we spoke about the centenarians, people who live to over 100 years old. It looks as if, beside the genetic factor that is there, the major contributor to that is the microbiome. Because when they looked at centenarians and they checked their gut microbiome, they have the gut microbiome of a 30-year-old, ladies and gentlemen. They have the gut microbiome of a 30-year-old. So it is quite possible that the reason that these centenarians are living so long and the reason why they are presenting with disease so late is because of the protection of the gut microbiome. So they look at the mucus layer, which is one of the evidences of gut health. One of the big evidences of gut health is that mucus layer that sits on top of the epithelial cells. Now, why that's important is because the bacteria that live in the pits, those little crevices or pits, are the ones that are responsible for producing the mucus. And if those bacteria are not there, if they've been destroyed, if they've been removed, if they've been killed by antibiotics and all sorts of things that we eat, then the bacteria are not producing the mucus. If the bacteria don't produce the mucus, the cells are now directly open to toxic injury. So these centenarians who are living till over 100, first, because of the choices they make, the lifestyle choices they made. Remember we said in terms of lifespan and health span, when you look at health span, dietary choices are what determines health span. It looks that they are able to maintain the gut organism sufficiently so that the mucus is maintained. And that really seems to be the key. And one bacteria that has been shown to be linked to longevity, living long, is the Akkermansia muciniphila. That's the name of it, Akkermansia muciniphila, which tells you what it is. It's a mucin-loving bacteria. That's the name of a bacteria. The Akkermansia, which lives in the mucinous layer of the gut, also produces mucin. So it lives in that mucus layer, but it produces that nice thick mucus layer that protects the epithelial lining of the gut. And these centenarians have a very strong, a large percentage of their gut being the Akkermansia muciniphila, or the mucus-loving bacteria. So what about irritable bowel syndrome, irritable bowel disease? In health, you have pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory bacteria, and you have a balance. You have more pro than anti-inflammatory, and so you have a nice balance. For people who have this irritable bowel syndrome, which means they get bloating, diarrhea, all that type of thing on a regular basis, there is an imbalance between the pro-inflammatory, which is too much. There's too much pro-inflammatory bacteria, and the anti-inflammatory. The anti-inflammatory are the so-called healthy bacteria. So when you get this loss of balance, for whatever reason, you can get irritable bowel syndrome, and then you can get all the symptoms attached to it. It has to do with the bacteria in your gut, and the protection and the relationship between the gut and the epithelial cell producing mucin. It has to have not just bacteria. It has to be the right bacteria that protects the gut and produces mucinous layer to protect the gut, and then you have the right balance of bacteria to deal with the unfriendly bacteria that are causing disease. So we've looked at some diseases. What about atherosclerosis? Atherosclerosis is hardening of the artery, which is what leads to coronary artery disease, heart attacks. Well, turns out that the gut flora are a key factor in producing inflammatory components that lead to atherosclerosis. If you have an imbalance within the gut, then the enzymes that are produced within them form these what are called TMAOs, which is just a big name for a toxin production. It's a trimethyl antioxidant one, and it is able to attack the blood vessel causing atherosclerosis. Trimethyl N-oxide, and it's an oxide. So, all of that process we know. You see, ladies and gentlemen, now that we know this, we are now seeing the link between this and the bacteria. Gut bacteria also involve the gut-brain axis. That has to do with depression, anxiety, panic attacks, inability to sleep, comes from the gut. So if you have this epithelial and the microbial organism and you have a leaky gut syndrome, you get a lot of cytokines. Cytokines are products of the immune system that are produced, and neurotransmitters which are not in balance, and they go into the blood, cause cortisol and adrenaline to be secreted. They go to the brain, they influence your moods, they influence your cognitions, your emotions. They mess up your hypothalamic axis. It's all coming from all of this production from short-chain fatty acids and enteric bacteria, which are not in balance with the proper gut bacteria that is part of your microbiome. So there are lots of factors that will affect your microbiome: your genetics, your birth root, we said, your geography where you live, what sort of hygiene you're functioning with, as opposed to some people live in very bad conditions, stress, the type of diet or nutrition, drugs that you're taking, even if they're good drugs in the sense of you need it for your medical condition, but they do impact on your microbiome. And they can end up producing very inflammatory oxidative stresses, gram-negative bacteria proliferating, infectious opportunities for pathogens, and altered metabolic products. So all of these factors can influence, the genetics, your birth root, your geography where you live, your hygiene, your stress, your diet and nutrition and drugs can influence how that microbiome is expressed. So how do we support gut bacteria? That's the question. We kind of understand it now. We know what it is. We know it has a great impact on one's health. What can we do? What can I do to support the gut bacteria that is going to keep me healthy? Because as we say, centenarians, maybe the link and the reason why they are healthy is because they have found a way to support their gut bacteria. Maybe that's the answer. So how do we stop this leaky gut experience, this intestinal permeability? Well, we know that once you get a leaky gut, all these pathogens and toxins and bacteria that are there are able to leak through the gut. Remember we said leaky gut means the mucus layer is lost, and you have stress on the cells, and you lose the tight junction. So they open up, and all these toxins and bacteria and so on can get into the circulation, activate the immune system. The immune system says, look, what is going on here? They're suspecting that I'm being under attack. The immune system goes into a cytokine storm. You have the whole body going into crazy, and then you get sick. These toxins, therefore, are running through this leaky gut, the gap, instigating a cytokine storm with inflammatory and immune response. And so what are the things, first of all, that will affect the layer? Remember we said the cells, then there's the mucus layer. What sort of things will affect this mucus layer that will allow the starting of leaky gut? Well, certain drugs like non-steroidals like ibuprofen. Now, I don't know how many of you remembered or may have noticed that they said that if you have COVID-19, you shouldn't use ibuprofen. But that's the reason why. That's the reason why. It suppresses the immune system. It destroys the mucus layer of the gut. Then we have food sprayed with various chemicals. The glyphosate was the one that was being in the news. Now it's gone quiet. They probably shook hands and paid money to each other. But glyphosate was in the news recently, Roundup, because the chemical has been shown to definitely affect the immune system through the gastrointestinal tract. And so you spray, and you use Roundup as it's a herbicide. You spray it on to prevent weeds. But the problem is that it takes 7 to 10 days to clear from the plant. So you spray it on the plant. I mean, one of the good things about it is very selective to weeds versus crop. But you have to spray it on the plant. You spray it on the plant. It takes 7 to 10 days for it to clear. But sometimes they're harvesting the crop before the 7 to 10 days is up, and you go eat the thing. Then you are ingesting glyphosate. And that's been the big thing why Santo is the company that's producing glyphosate, has had so much lawsuits recently. As I said, I haven't heard much about it recently. They're probably settled out of court. Then there's antibiotics, and they're putting antibiotics. We're talking about two different types of antibiotics. Antibiotics that you take, all sometimes justly, sometimes unjustly, in my judgment. And there's also antibiotics in the meat you eat. So a lot of the food, a lot of the animals that they grow, their husbandry, they put the antibiotics as growth promoters and to stop them from getting infection. Like, for example, Newcastle disease, you use an antibiotic for it. Newcastle disease, of course, is Newcastle here. And they use antibiotics to stop the animal from getting infection. Or, you don't want the animal to die. I mean, like, what's the point? But these antibiotics will stay in the meat if it's not if it doesn't give it enough time to clear it, and then, or in the plants, if it's not given enough plant time, or if you're taking antibiotics because you're sick, you got a cold or whatever. It has an impact on the mucous lining of the gut. And once you break down the mucous lining of the gut, ladies and gentlemen, you are now exposing yourself, that single cellular structure, that one layer of cells, to toxins and bacteria and all sorts of problems. Now, something else that is there is lectins in food. And I'm going to talk a little bit about lectins because I just need you to understand what you're dealing with. So lectins in food is been linked to atherosclerosis, is linked to neurodegenerative diseases, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's disease, and so on, has been linked to lectins in food. So the question you would probably ask me at this point is, Dr. Tony, what exactly are the lectins in food? Now, let's talk about that since you asked. So a lectin is a carbohydrate binding protein. So it's a protein that binds to carbohydrates. Does that make sense? It's a protein that binds to carbohydrates. It likes to join to carbohydrates, and it sticks to the cell membrane of the digestive tract. Now remember, your digestive tract is made up of carbohydrates and lipids. It's a phospholipid compound, and it's got carbohydrates. The mucinous layers are it's carbohydrates. And lectins loves carbohydrates. It loves to attach to the mucous layer, and it loves to attach to the cell wall. So these things stick to the digestive tract, and they can cause injury to the digestive tract. For example, they exist in most plant and animal foods, and the highest quantities would be in legumes, the nightshade group of vegetables, potatoes, tomatoes, aubergines, bell peppers. And one more. Potatoes, aubergines, bell peppers, tomatoes, aubergines, bell peppers. All right, those are the ones that are deadly nightshade group of vegetables. Dairy product. There is no evidence that dairy helps calcium at all. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of reason why you shouldn't be doing that. The absorption of calcium is unopposed. It's unopposed calcium. It's a high calcium that is not absorbed effectively in the system at all. And there are a number of grains like barley, quinoa, and rice, and so on that have high lectins in them. So there are some lectins which are toxic, like ricin, which is in castor oil. They are toxic. I remember my mother used to give me castor oil when I was young. I'm surprised I'm alive. But it's used for bowel, as an laxative. But that's very high in ricin, which is potentially toxic. So eating foods with a large amount of lectins can cause gas or gastric distress for some people because they're not digestible. They bind to cell membranes in the gastrointestinal tract, and they can cause disruption of metabolism. Now, much of these things are foods we eat. So you say, well, how is it that I'm eating these things but I'm not getting any of those symptoms? Well, if you cook a food, when you cook your food, you destroy a lot of the lectins. When you eat it raw, or soaked or undercooked, such as kidney beans, it can be toxic due to the high lectin levels. So a lot of mothers and grandmothers knew well that they used to say, you soak your peas overnight. You see, you soak your beans, you soak your peas overnight. My wife still does it. God bless her soul. And then you cook it in the morning. You throw the water off and you cook it. Because these are high in lectins, and those lectins, ladies and gentlemen, can cause toxic injury to the gut. So there are some foods you should not eat raw, and this happens to be some of them. You shouldn't be eating beans and peas raw. It's not a good plan. It's not a good plan because of the high lectin load. They should, but cooking does destroy it if you soak them and then cook them. If not, you can have a lot of problems. So one study reported that soaking beans isn't enough to remove the lectin content. You have to cook them to reduce the lectin content in them. So I know that some people are the so-called, well, let's just eat raw food all the time. I don't really share that viewpoint, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be honest with you. I don't share that viewpoint. I think when we get to heaven, we eat raw food. When we're on earth, we have to cook it. We do have to cook. Don't cook everything. I don't have to cook everything to death, but that's not the point. There are certain foods you have to cook because of the danger of the lectin diet. I've said it. Don't shoot me, but it is what it is. Some research shows that lectins can disrupt your diet, interfere with nutrient absorption, and cause intestinal damage if it's eaten in large quantity over a period of time. So somebody who says, well, I'm only eating beans, I'm a vegan, and I'm only going to eat beans for the rest of my life, that's all I eat is beans and rice. Well, yeah, you might not find yourself in a good place there. Because some of those things, especially if you're using it over a prolonged period of time, you're not changing your diet, you're not altering your diet, not having a balanced and a changing diet. To live is to change, to live long is to change often. You see? And that's it. It is potential injury with high lectin foods eaten on a prolonged basis. So here are some high lectin foods. So in the deadly nitrate group, tomatoes, potatoes, goji berries, peppers, eggplants, or aubergines. This is what we call them here, aubergines. All legumes like lentils, red beans, peanuts, and chickpea. Peanut-based products like peanut butter and peanut oil. Those are all very high lectin foods. All grains and products made with grains, so grain or flour, including cakes, crackers, and bread. Dairy products such as milk, which is from the A1. There's an A2, which is a low lectin milk, but A1 is a high lectin product. Ladies and gentlemen, that's just the facts. Those are the facts. I give you the information as I have it. And I want to emphasize over and over. You say, well, I'm eating all of these things. Now, that it may mean that your health is not optimized if you're not doing it properly. So you're cooking and soaking and sprouting. Like a lot of older people said you sprouted plants. That's correct. When you sprout a plant, the sprouted seeds, you reduce significantly the lectin concentration in those plants. But if you're not doing that and you're just eating half-cooked food, you are in all kind of trouble. And your health is not optimized. Now, as I say, you may survive, and God bless your cotton socks, but you are not living at your optimum because you are suppressing your immune system and your gut. And that's probably why we start getting all these diseases when we're 35 and 40, because we're killing ourselves with a lot of these foods. So, what are the ways we can support our microbiome? What are some of the things we can do? Well, if remember we talked about that bacteria, Akkermansia. Akkermansia is the bacteria that supports the production of mucus that protects the gut lining. So you want to support Akkermansia, and the tubers will do it. Yam, taro, yucca, sweet potato. Sweet potato is a very good potato to eat. Very high in fiber, very high in nutrients. But there's others as well. Yam, taro, yucca, and so on. Mushrooms, inulin-containing foods like chicory and radicchio and endives, Jerusalem artichokes. These are all products that have been shown to support Akkermansia. Akkermansia is also supported by an Indian supplement, ashwagandha. Ashwagandha. That's a supplement that supports Akkermansia. I make sure every week, 2-3 times a week, I would use ashwagandha. It's very good for sleep, by the way. Not everybody responds to it, but it's really very good for sleep. Anyway, so we talk about the foods that help Akkermansia. All right, those are the foods, and I gave you ashwagandha as the supplement that will do it as well. Some foods that might undermine your gut. So these are ones that are not real good for your gut because they can cause loss of your microbiome. Animal proteins, particularly the red meats, dairy, and eggs. Now, a lot of these have a lot of good health benefits. They're rich in protein and so on, and they have choline, which is important for brain function. So that's really important on one hand. But for people who have a high animal diet, protein diet, so that's why I'm not on this Atkins diet kind of thing. People who say, look, all you have to do is eat meat. I'm not saying eating a little meat will kill you. That's not the suggestion at all. As a matter of fact, to the contrary. But the point is that people who go on the Atkins diet, this is a potentially dangerous one, because that's all they eat. They eat in this meat that's 100% meat. And so people who use a lot of protein, particularly animal protein, they have this higher inflammatory condition. They have inflammatory bowel disease. And that reflects the problem of the gut health with the high protein load that they're taking into the system. And they're not supporting akkermansia. So fermentable foods. Here's the other one that causes problems with your gut, and your gut flora and your gut mucus. Fermentable foods. So processed foods which are high in fructose. So anything that has high fructose corn syrup. High fructose corn syrup is a fermentable food. The gut does not like it. The gut does not like it at all. So anything with high fructose corn syrup, your sorbitol, artificial sweeteners, i.e. everything we eat, everything you drink, I've just listed, haven't I? Here's the other one that you got to watch: fruit juices. Fruit juices like orange juice, pineapple juice, juices as opposed to the fruit. There's a difference between orange and orange juice. We're talking about the things we buy in the bottle, and I buy it every now and then and drink it, I'll be honest with you. But I do recognize that in doing that, first of all, they put a lot of artificial sweeteners in them, and sugar, and sorbitol, and high fructose corn syrup. So when you get the fruit juice, you think you're getting fruit juice alone. No, you're not. You're getting fruit juice and artificial sweeteners and sorbitol and high fructose corn syrup. So you're getting a double whammy. A number of sweeteners, a number of condiments, jams, jellies, and so on. You've got to be careful about all of these things that can potentially they're fermentables. A lot of these things are also in FODMAP, the so-called FODMAP diet. You know, when people have all of these food allergies, they put them on a FODMAP diet. FODMAP diet is essentially this. They take out all the things and just give them sugar water, essentially, and then slowly trying to introduce your food. So it's a very bland, simple diet. It's not meant to be for long term. Now here's another one: foods containing antibiotics or antibiotic exposure. So a lot of farmers, they treat their animals with antibiotics, we say, to reduce the infections, and those antibiotics, when you eat them, you eat the antibiotics too. So a lot of people will buy meat that is antibiotic free. So a number of supermarkets will sell you antibiotic free meat, which is not a bad plan. It makes common sense. And antibiotics, when you take them, for coughs and colds and infections and so on, those things are messing up your so-called friendly bacteria or the gut microbiome, and allowing the unfriendly, the unhealthy bacteria to proliferate. That being said, in America anyway, I don't know what the statistic for Australia is, 80% of all the antibiotics that are sold in the United States end up in farm animals. So, it kills off all your healthy bacteria, and therefore you struggle. It affects the gut microbiome. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, the gut microbiome is key to a healthy life, all aspects. Fried foods. Ouch, I heard somebody say. Fried foods, the body finds them, when you fry your food, it's very hard to digest them. And so people who cook in the saturated oils, particularly when you go to the fish and chip shops and these shops that sell fried all the time, because they're cooking them in recycled oil, that oil becomes very undigestible, and so it may irritate the stomach, cause diarrhea, gas, stomach pain. It can affect the gut bacteria as well. They promote harmful gut bacteria, and so we should limit the fried foods to reduce the risk of many diseases, including liver disease, which seems to be affected by it because of the toxin that is produced by fried foods. Okay, what else can we do? Let's wind this up. What else can we do? Exercise. 90% reduction in Alzheimer's disease in people who exercise. It may be that exercise changes the proportion of friendly bacteria. It increases your amount of friendly bacteria. So maybe the answer is not the exercise of itself, is that the exercise is allowing the friendly bacteria, the gut microbiome to prosper. And as the gut microbiome is prospering, you reduce the incidence of mental neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia. I suspect that's probably what's happening. Again, funny enough, just simple meditation and prayer and even yoga and so on has been shown to change the gut microbiome, so that there is this interplay between the mind and the gut. there is a gut-brain connection, as we call it. That by prayer and meditation and you removing stress, you're able to actually change your gut flora in favor of the healthy gut microbiome. Just by reducing your stress and going into periods of meditation and prayer. No wonder the Bible says pray without ceasing. God had it right. He knew he was doing, in so doing, we will end up having a healthy gut, and in so doing have a healthy life. Now there are a few things that you can add. Probiotics and prebiotics. Now that's two different things. So let me start with the prebiotic first. It's in the second part. The prebiotic, these are foods which are non-digestible, which the gut bacteria use for their food. So they are called prebiotics. So they're non-digestible carbohydrates, essentially. And the prebiotics is the food that the gut uses, the gut bacteria uses for its own metabolism and its own health. And so it increases favorable growth of bacteria. Probiotics, which is the first note there, is actually live bacteria that you take in. So I use pre and probiotics. A prebiotic feeds the bacteria. A probiotic is actual bacteria to try and reculture the gut, the entire gastrointestinal tract. And it's been shown to be beneficial, both pre and probiotics. So here are some examples of prebiotics and probiotics. So helpful prebiotic foods: garlic, onion, wheat, soybean, oats, artichoke, asparagus, and leeks. So I use a lot of onion and garlic because that's what I like. I don't use much wheat because I think wheat has other issues with related to lectin production. But garlics and onions and so on are very good. For probiotics, which would support the growth of healthy bacteria, they have these cultured yolks. They have the live, what they call live yogurt, or they have live cottage cheese, fermented foods like kimchi and tempeh, miso and sauerkraut and so on. I know that's a very favorite of a number of cultural groups, the sauerkraut, and that's very good for probiotic support of the gut. So those are things that you can do just to improve your health. Now, when all fails, this is something that is done. It's done here in Australia. It's done all over the world, in America. And this sounds a little horrible, but it is what it is. It's called fecal matter transplant. So what you do in some people who have irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and they said, look, let's give it a try. They take somebody else's feces, and they test them to make sure they don't have any nasty stuff. But if it's a healthy, they would test the feces and say, well, you know what, John, your feces is really good. Can you give it to Mary? And so they will take the feces of one person and they would inject it into the rectum of the other person, into the colon. And funny enough, so they do it through colonoscopies. And a number of meta-analysis. There are 3 good studies which show that people with irritable bowel syndrome, Crohn's and ulcerative colitis do better after they've given them fecal matter transplant. So it looks pretty horrible to say this is what you're doing, that you're taking somebody else's feces and putting it in you. But if you suffer with a disease like Crohn's ulcerative colitis where your body cannot heal because the bacteria are so upset and because the gut is so destroyed and so damaged that there's no way to heal them, you might consider it as an option. It is done here, I should tell you. Not here in Gold Coast, but at least not that I know of. I know it's done in Melbourne. So that's called fecal matter transplant, and that's one of the things people are using to restore gut flora again. And it's used for, as I said, dysbiosis is leaky gut syndrome. Those are just showing some studies that were done to show how there was an improvement in patients with a number of bowel conditions when they went on, including By the way, they use it also for fibromyalgia, for fibromyalgia, and showed that people with fibromyalgia after fecal matter transplant were better. So, as I said, a number of diseases are now being shown to be linked to the dysfunctional gut microbiome. So we talked about intermittent fasting already. Calorie restriction is intermittent fasting, and the other one is time-restricted eating, TRE. So time-restricted eating, not eating anything after 6 p.m. on a 12-hour cycle. You see? It's a 12-hour cycle. So 12 hours after you eat, you don't eat. So you eat 6 in the morning, and the last meal you'll eat is 6 at night. And that has been shown to help people with their general health span. But now you could see why it actually supports a healthy microbiome. This technique supports a healthy microbiome. So it's something that one wants to consider. Look, it's a good one, which we call brainwash day. You've got to brainwash yourself every day. In other words, wash your brain. So the brain has lymphatics. It has a system that allows people listen, the brain, like the body, is producing toxins all the time. Dead cells, chemicals, waste material is sitting there. It needs to be removed. You know, you talk about tau protein, you talk about proteins involved in the tangle of the Alzheimer's, the fibrillary network, and so on. You need to remove those amyloid type proteins. You've got to get rid of those things from the brain. And it shows that during sleep, which is why I said, remember I said sleep and the bowel are two of the most important things I could tell you about your health. Sleep and bowel. But anyway, so the brain lymphatic cleanses during deep sleep, early in the sleep cycle. So if you're not getting good sleep, if you're not getting, well, I suppose phase 4 and then REM sleep, you are not going to get cleansing of the brain lymphatics, and therefore your brain will always be residually toxic. It shows that the brain shrinks by 20% after a good night's sleep. 20%. That's how much it's cleansing, removing a lot of that toxins out of the body. Get rid of amyloid and tau protein, which are linked to Alzheimer's disease. It really requires a lot of blood flow to go to the brain. So if you're eating, that's why the advice is don't eat anything after 6 and give yourself 4 hours before you go to bed, because for proper brain washing every night, you need to have a good high blood supply. And if you're eating your meal, you're going to reduce the amount of blood that goes to the brain and the amount of energy that's required to metabolize, and that energy is not available, and that blood flow is not available to the brain for its brain washing, cleansing of the brain, cleansing of the toxins and all the cells and the tau protein and all the amyloid, and just getting your brain in a better place for the next day. So sleep is as vital as eating in health. Few other things: use a lot of olive oil. There's a number of studies that are present. The Predime study, which shows that people who use olive oil had improved memory and a few incidents of cardiac events. I bathe everything in olive oil. That's me. I love olive oil. Olive oil is rich in polyphenols, which grows brain nutrients. It restricts the enzyme TMAO, which is involved as a pro-inflammatory for cardiac disease, hardening of the artery. TMAO, which is produced really from disordered gut and phosphatidyl proteins. It is made when gut bacteria digest meat and choline in eggs. And olive oil restricts that enzyme that changes it into this inflammatory chemical that attacks your arteries. You know? So in conclusion, we've reached the end. The gut microbiome is made up of billions of bacteria and other organisms that coexist with the human cell in the intestinal tract. Now, I want to make sure that you understand, we're not just discussing the bacteria. We're discussing the bacteria in symbiotic relationship with the mucus, with the epithelial cells, with the immune system of the gut. That's called the gut microbiome. It's the whole ecosystem. But you destroy one aspect of that ecosystem, and you are going to suffer terrible consequences to your health. So it's important in digestion, metabolism, immune function, brain health, cardiac function, neurodegenerative diseases. It's just terribly important. Diabetes, high blood pressure, Alzheimer's, you name immune system disorders, everything seems to be coming right now from the gut. And if you have a good, healthy gut, you're going to have minimum disease. So the microbiome gets its training from early life. It's influenced by your genes, the method of your delivery, your age, your stress, illness, environment, the medication, your diet, the drugs, all of these things. That being said, there's no ideal healthy gut. Everyone is different. You have to just find the bacteria that works with you and for you, and you'll know that by trial and error. It can be disrupted, we said, by a number of factors that can promote inflammation, which is a potent risk for both physical and mental disorders. And there are several things we can do to help our gut. And I've spent a lot of time going through all the things that you can do so you can remain healthy and well balanced. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't protect your gut, you will be sick. I can't emphasize that too much. That's why the secrets of a healthy gut is the secrets of a healthy life. You know, we spoke about health span and lifespan. If you want to have a healthy life, you need to understand the secrets of a healthy gut. So here we are, the war of the worlds. You see? And you have to determine what you want to do based on the information I provided for you. So life is about to change. To live is to change. To live long is to change often. You've got to change often. As the information comes to you, change. So you have the choice, either an average life or a memorable life. But the choice, ladies and gentlemen, is still yours. So beloved, I wish above all things, as I always close, I wish above all things that you would prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. And thank you very much.